in the ACC. And Gibbs, Jameer Gibbs, to me is a breakout player. Kickoff return for a touchdown last week. Out of the backfield, I think he's had 200 yards in total offense and a number of consecutive games. He is a weapon, outstanding player. Certainly Sims is a dynamic quarterback. Did not play last week, but his replacement is pretty darn good as well. And so when Jordan goes in there, I mean, this is a football team that has really good football players on both sides of the ball. I know their record doesn't indicate it, but I think you look at the scores of the games they played. They really handled North Carolina earlier in the season. They've lost some games here, but this is a classic team that if you do not pay them the due respect and you do not play well against them, they will beat you. So they get your attention. I do. When I watch them play, it's good players on both sides of the ball. And then, as I mentioned with the Gibbs kid, I think he's the player of the year in the ACC, in my estimation, in terms of his talent and what he does to impact the football game. So with that, you're getting a really, really dangerous football team, and one that has finished their schedule in the ACC and now plays Notre Dame and Georgia in back-to-back weeks. So, in terms of their motivation, these are their bowl games in back-to-back weeks. So, as you can see, as a head coach, these are the games that you feel a little bit uneasy about because your opponent has, nothing really to worry about going into the game other than just taking a free swing and playing without anything to worry about, in the sense that one at a time, Notre Dame and Georgia, and get after it. So we have to play well.
Tim Priester, you're up first.
Right here, Brian. I think it started when Coach Elko came in 2017, when there was a greater commitment to depth and getting more guys on the field, and you have continued that through this year. Just wondering how that's impacted your program. It seemed with all the guys that you had out on Saturday night, the depth really came through, and just the impact in November on your program.
Yeah, well, certainly it was necessary to have those guys out on the field. We had a number of guys that were, certainly injured, but I think just the development during the year too, Tim. I mean, some of them weren't ready to play at a high level, and I think as the year went on, they were called upon. I look at, O'Reilly Mills may not have been ready to play at a higher level early, but he was later. Certainly Ramon Henderson would be in that category, as well as Xavier. They were good players, but they just needed more time. And so I think the depth of our football team is certainly called upon later in the season, and they have to come through for us, and we saw that last night.
Because in the early years here, you struggle a little bit in November, and you've been much better. I mean, do you tie
I think
that?
that's recruiting, though, more than anything. I think that's the depth in the recruiting process showing itself more so than in years past, where we just didn't have those players that we could count on later in the year to put them out there.
I don't think we've discussed at any point this season your safeties coach and what impact he's had on your program and defense, but you got some young safeties there that have been playing pretty good football. What role has Coach O'Leary played in that?
Yeah, Coach O'Leary's done a great job. I mean, the development there and those players. Look, it takes time to get those guys ready. It's not like you can just roll them out there. And he's done a really good job with those guys across the board. But it's a team approach there. Kerry Cooks is back there. He's got obviously a veteran leader there too to help him. Mike Mickens pitches in back there as well. So there's a collaborative approach of a number of guys working together back there. But you certainly, you know, Coach O'Leary, you know, gets a lot of the credit there.
Henderson remains at safety?
Yeah, and you know, he's been playing safety and nickel. That's really been, you know, where we felt like his impact would be, and it'll continue to be there.
In your thoughts on Xavier Watts, who's seen much more time in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, he's coming along. You know, I think we just continue to impress upon, you know, some of the fundamentals with him. We just think that, you know, that next stage of development for him, being a little bit more aggressive and tackling, and he just has so much to offer. We just think that there's another stage for him of development, and he's getting there. He's going to be a good player for us.
Do you think that he was more comfortable at the safety position than he has been at corner?
Xavier?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm jumping back to Henderson, actually.
Yeah, you know, I think just, you know, his length and range really, I think, stood out for us as a safety, you know, in terms of what we were looking for. So as we played him more at the nickel position, you know, those things kind of, I don't know, stood out to us. And then when we got him in the game, you know, it became pretty apparent that the safety was a comfortable position for him.
Yeah. Last thing, in your second series, after you were held on 4th and 1 in the first series, you lined up for a field goal. You called timeout. Was that because of the play clock, or did you just change your mind? You wanted to go for it?
Yeah, I just changed my mind. I at first thought it was 4th and a little bit longer. I thought it was like 4th and 3, but it was actually shorter than that. And I just flat out changed my mind. I felt like in that situation, early in the game, with timeouts, that a timeout at that time, if we had the right play calls in 4th down, that I wasn't going to settle for a field goal there. So I just flat out just took the timeout and made the decision to put the team back out there.
John Finner is next.
Hi, Brian. I wonder if you put your stethoscope on and tell us the conditions of your injured players that you have coming into this week, and also when did the flu start to take a hold of the team last week, and has it run its course?
All right, who's injured? You know, I don't know that we have anybody that, you know, from Saturday's game that we feel is, you know, that would lead us to be concerned with this week. You know,
right. Kyle Stoll.
Yeah, Kyle, obviously, his injury is going to take time more than anything else. Yeah, you know, bumps and bruises from the game, but nothing that would put anybody out for this week. Yeah, we're still fighting it. You know, the flu is one of those things where if you get you get the wrong strand and you don't have the right defense against it, which we obviously didn't on our team relative to the vaccine, it can affect you. And it's affected our campus. So, you know, we're just battling it the best we can. And, you know, I think that we're still in the midst of it right now.
Talk about the play of your defensive line all season, but with all the things that happened with the flu and things last week and jockeying people around, what have you know, the job that Mike's done this year?
Well, Mike does a great job every year. I mean, I think in particular, you know, Nana was out most of the week and Myron was sick, you know, so we're really, you know, forced into, you know, figuring out where we were going to get some more support at the defensive end position. So that's where Riley was moved out. Stroke of genius that we did that, and, you know, he comes up with 3 sacks. And, you know, so that's where, you know, obviously we felt like we needed a little bit more assistance out at that position. And Alex has been dealing with a little bit of a back strain, you know, and so we didn't know that we had enough at that position. That's why we made that move. Nana got back, and was able to give us some help, but he wasn't 100%. So, again, just guys stepping up into those positions and doing their job. We've got, Cross and Lacey and Heinisch, and, those guys have been able to really do a great job for most of the year. Jason inside, Justin outside, the twins, they've been awesome. So it's just been a rotation of so many guys on the defensive line that, have done a great job. Isaiah gets a lot of the credit and deservingly so, but there's just so many names and so many guys that have, added to that defensive line. And it's been, selfless and guys, just pitching in and doing a great job.
Eric Hansen is next.
Brian, I got a couple that relate to senior day. One is the two portal people that are your starters. What maybe had you learned from past portal experiences that helped you get two guys that are such big contributors, and maybe what did you learn this year from that process that might help you moving forward with the portal?
Well, it's for us, when it comes to the transfer portal, it's generally somebody that's a grad transfer more than anything else. And then, there's always going to be somebody that, relative to, playing time or fit, they're always going to have that chance to make a decision to move on. That's never changed, whether the portal was there or not. I mean, it's just, I think it's just heightened now because it has a name, right? The portal. But for us, in terms of the transfer, it's still generally speaking in that grad transfer. It's got to meet a criteria. It's got to be a fit here at Notre Dame at the end of the day. So I guess that's the best way I could probably describe it from that standpoint. And we've done a pretty good job of managing it, to find the fit necessary within our program in the immediate fit that we had this year with, obviously, Kane and Jack. They've served an incredible need, and they've been really good fits for us.
With senior day, I guess it gets a little bit more even confusing than normal. You got all kinds of senior classes.
Yeah, right.
COVID. The one I wanted to ask you about was Myron's class. You got Myron, Jonathan Dorr, Jeremiah. You got like 6 guys in the last day or two of that cycle. Can you remember what that was like? And did you realize you were getting such quality right at the end of the cycle because there were guys that were flipping their commitments and all that stuff?
Yeah, to me, it's the journey that I remember much more than the actual, what happened in the last, week or 48 hours. And I remember the journey with those guys over the 4 years more than I do remember what led up to it, and the memories that I have with those guys. So what I'll remember is when they run out for the last time is the time that I've had with them, more so than what led up to them coming here. And that will be the special moment for me.
I wanted to follow up on Kyle, but do you have any timetable in terms of when he can even start running, start practicing, any of that?
Yeah, I mean, the injury itself is generally a 6-week injury. So there was some meniscus involvement, but that is no longer an issue. There's no meniscus at all. He's got a great meniscus, but this is this is much more about the healing around the knee itself, and there's no structural damage at all. But it generally takes about 6 weeks, and so we're dealing with an injury that usually takes about 6 weeks.
And it was a fat pad impingement?
Yeah, so it's really the tissue. I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to get too much information here. Yeah, but there's tissue and fibers that kind of connective tissue and fiber around the joint and the knee, and they get pinched or pulled, and that's that's the issue that has to heal. So it just takes some time.
Last one for me, kind of following up on Tim's question about your depth. When you looked at the tackle totals, there were guys that hadn't played much that had a bunch.
Yep.
One of them was Prince Collie. I wondered, is that him just kind of running around, or do you see some super progress with those 4 tackles?
Yeah, Prince is certainly somebody that has the athletic ability to play the position, but it's still a work in progress for him. He's still learning as we go, but he's so athletic. He can run, he can get to the football. So I think it's a little bit of both. It's nice to see him. He can find the ball, he can see it, he can run, he's athletic. And it's great that he can get into the game and he can immediately find the ball and he can go get it. And know that we can put him in the game and he can impact it. He's not ready to take over, a particular position, but pretty athletic and nice to put a true freshman in the game.
Patrick Engel is next.
Brian, you talked about the red zone offense last week and coming off a game where that was, it looked 3 quarters pretty sharp. What did you see about in terms of the execution and what Tommy was trying to do down there that you liked?
Yeah, I mean, taking shots in the end zone, is what we're trying to do. Obviously, we put the ball on the ground there, and that was just, fundamentally sloppy football there. But, getting the opportunity to get shots into the end zone was what we were trying to do, and setting it up accordingly. And I think it was well planned and well thought out. And, it's about making plays down there, and we made the plays necessary.
And then on Kyle, 6 weeks, and looking at that, at this point, how likely do you think it is that he's probably not going to get cleared until the regular season would end?
Yeah, well, 6 weeks would take him through the end of the regular season, and then, we have to see where we are with, college football playoffs, bowl games, things like that.
Tyler James, go ahead.
Brian, you played without 4 of your 7 captains on Saturday. How were you able to overcome that? What sort of impact do those guys have that, even if they're not playing on game day, that still sort of maybe resonates with the team?
Yeah, it was really difficult to come up with whether we were going to go heads or tails. That was the difficult part. No, seriously, when you have that kind of leadership out, it's. I think the effect more, Tyler, is how the other guys perceive it, and so it's important that I immediately change the way the team is thinking. I want them to think right, and I don't want them to think, "Oh, woe is me. We have all these guys out." It's why is this happening to us? So just getting them to think the right way about captains being out was probably the most important thing, and they handled it the right way. They thought the right way about it. Let's do it for them, right? They can't play, and some of these guys are running out of games left, So I think just, getting them to think the right way about not having them out there was probably, for me, the most important thing.
What were your takeaways from Tyler Buchner getting some expanded run in the second half against Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, it was really good that we got him in there and got some expanded play, as you mentioned. Every experience is a new one, and there's like different conversations, like, with the fumble itself, like when he came off, like his reaction and our conversation and how he took that, and just all those things are really good, because we want to get him back in there and see how he leads that next drive. So, you can't duplicate that in practice. Now, did we want to fumble the ball? Absolutely not. But all those things are building towards his development. And so I think from my perspective as the head coach, those are moments that, allows us to really see what he's about. And we like the things that we see about him.
We've talked a lot about the depth across the team. You've had players step up at many positions. The defensive line, I think it's not only that guys step up and get by for a week without a few guys, but it seems to remain a strength no matter who's out. How does Mike Elston get that group to that position, and is that maybe a blueprint or a standard for other positions to get to as well?
Well, I think it's similar to what, we saw on the offensive line in a sense that, we just were a little bit, I think we didn't give them enough time to get ready. I mean, there was a lot of criticism early on the offensive line, but that group was trying to develop themselves. The defensive line is, developed, over a period of time where they have a lot of depth, and all of those guys from, they get 15 plays or they get 12 plays or 18 plays over a period of time, and Mike does a great job of making sure that they're all involved in some fashion. So when they do get in, they appreciate the opportunity, and they recognize that there's other guys that can be playing as well. So they relish their opportunity. Whereas, on the offensive line, we had a whole new group of guys that hadn't played at all. And so it was a little bit of a different kind of situation. And so I think we're developing that, as we go. And we hope to have the similar kind of situation at all positions.
Pete Byrne is next.
Brian, to your right here. I remember a year ago, so much of the characterization of that class was how they came in when the program was at a turning point and struggled through a tough year, and then led a big turnaround in the big picture. I'm curious how you would characterize this class as a group that came in after that, but has been a large part of some sustained success.
Yeah, I mean, this is a group that has won a lot of football games. I think, over a 5-year period of time, they have a chance to be the winningest in the history of Notre Dame football. I think they've won 52 games in a 5-year span. So, look, I mean, they have lived up to the standards, and I think have understood what now the standard is at Notre Dame, and have passed that on. I mean, it's pretty. This is pretty rare air that they've been flying under. So this group's going to go down as one of the best of all time, from that perspective.
Speaking of rare air, I would also argue maybe this group has flown a little under the radar compared to some of your past couple of teams, just based on having a regular season loss that the other programs or the other teams didn't have. Do you think that at all has contributed to their ability to kind of continue to ascend this year? Like, it feels like in the big picture, it's been less about playoff talk, just more about week-to-week improvement.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had that before. I just think that this team is, a young team. We've, again, the other night, we've had, we had 8 true freshmen play. 7 on offense, 1 on defense, and at certain times during the game. And so there's been a lot of young players playing out there. So this is just a natural development of guys going out and developing and playing as they go, and getting better each and every week. Excuse me. So, I don't know that the playoff thing has really been much of a matter for them, as much as they've really focused on, how they can develop as a football team and get better each and every week.
You was talking about Buchner a little bit ago. How much of what you're doing with him now is geared towards what you hope to do with him in the future? And by that I mean, at what point do you stop thinking about what we need him to do next game, and are you thinking about his overall progression and potentially being the leader of your offense for a while?
I think you saw a little bit of that Saturday night. There was a little bit more in his package that would give you a glimpse as to what it would look like next year.
Pete Sampson's next.
The in-season improvement of the younger players, at what point in the off-season or camp or you sort of target that as like, this is something we have to be about this year, not just for next year, but to get through this year and win as many games as you can?
Yeah. I think we made the decision that we weren't going to be counting games as much when we went into camp. Like, this thought process of counting games was always like, yeah, the 4 games is like, hey, we got to count games. This year was like, we're not counting, we got to play them. And so the process was, let's play them, let's develop them, let's get them ready. And wherever they are in that continuum, let's not worry about the games. And so some of them, when we get to that point, we'll decide whether, we go past that threshold. Others, don't worry about it. Let's just play them. So we've seen that we've gotten to that point where we've pulled back on some, and on others where we've said, keep playing them because they can impact our football team.
Did you structure practices any differently or the offseason any differently to help accommodate this?
No, not necessarily, other than the fact that, when we got out of camp, we were able to have a pretty good idea in staff meetings of players that we were targeting as ready to play, and let's go play them.
You've been doing this a while. I was sort of interested about like sideline organization. I mean, you're usually oriented away from the sideline. You're looking out on the field, but like, what does a good sideline look for you? Like, how do you want it to look? What works?
Yeah, a good sideline is broken up between the offense and defense and seated where guys can come back, sit down, have boards where they can get instruction on the sidelines. It's got to be organized, and it's got to have a great flow of communication on the sidelines. It's got to be calm. It's got to have communication. And it's got to be an area where I can walk up and down on both sides and get to each one of the units. So from an organizational standpoint, it can't be chaotic. It's got to have, for me, the ability to teach while we're on the sideline.
Does the energy of it matter as much, or is it more just like it's reliable? You know who's where and when.
I think there are times that the energy has to be part of the game, but I think that most of it has to be when the units come off, they have to have their space. But in the flow of the game, those that are not, they've got to be involved in the game. That sideline has to be engaged participants and part of the game. I don't necessarily need flag wavers on the sideline and choreographed, kinds of situations, but I need them engaged, right? I don't need them looking up in the crowd and disengaged, but I need them engaged and part of the action. I think the best way to put it would be, a couple of weeks ago we had Chase Ketter in the game, and we had a kickoff, and he made a tackle, and the entire sideline was engaged. They saw that Chase was in the game, and they reacted accordingly. I think I'm more interested in that than I am in choreographed pieces on the sideline.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We have time for 2 questions on Zoom. Tim O'Malley, you're up first.
Coach, my question's about Jeff Collins taking over at Georgia Tech. One of the things he mentioned was they needed to get bigger because he took over an option offense. Obviously, he had to kind of overhaul everything.
Yeah.
Have they started getting there where he wants it?
Yeah, I think they're talented. I think his roster looks good. They're big on their defensive line. They can roll in as many defensive linemen as we've played against. And they're about 50-50, 3 down, 4 down. But from a defensive line position standpoint, they're as big as anybody that we're going to play against from that standpoint. So On the offensive line, they've done a nice job in the transfer portal. Their left tackles from Vanderbilt, who's an NFL player, a little banged up, but they've done a really good job. I mean, their skill is outstanding. I would give him an A+ in terms of turning over the roster in terms of recruiting.
And my follow-up for that, you didn't have to turn over a roster here, but I'm sure you did it other places, and you did have a whole new system that had to come in here. What is kind of I know there's more than one challenge, but what's the greatest challenge when you have to overhaul, but you have to win to be around for those 3 and 4 years as well?
Yeah, I've had to do that before. I won't tell you where. I'll let you guess. I mean, look, part of it is it still requires development of the talent that you have. So you have to develop players and identify players in the recruiting. So recruiting and then player development, they work hand in hand. So I think when you're talking about turning over a roster, it's taking the players you have, developing them, and from a recruiting standpoint, identifying those players that you can develop, because that's the quickest way to turning it around. Is taking the players you have and developing from the roster.
And we'll wrap up with Angelo DiCarlo. Ange, go ahead.
Coach, I was wondering if one defensive unit maybe has impressed you more than the others. Obviously, they've all gone through their own sets of interesting seasons, losing so many linebackers early, the secondary playing without Kyle for the last several games, and we talked about all the depth that you've had to use on the defensive line. Is one unit stood out to you, as impressed you more based on what they've experienced this year?
You're talking about the 3 levels of our defense: defensive line, linebackers, and safety. Inch, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's a good question. I think you could make the case, for the safety position. Without Hamilton, you would think that immediately that's a huge void to fill. And it is, and it still is, right? Because you really can't replace a guy like that. But then you watch Ramon, the other night. I mean, he made an interception. He was in a too high zone. He was just inside the left hash, and he went all the way across the field and picked that ball off the numbers. I mean, that's incredible range. So, finding that kind of range at safety, you could start there. But then you go to defensive end, and then Riley Mills comes up with 3 sacks. And that's pretty good. Look, I mean, what J.D. Bertrand's done this year for us, losing Marist. Marist was, poised to be a difference maker for us this year. So, I mean, I think you could probably take from those 3, a little bit from each level. And make the case there. That would be my estimation.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, guys.